Hi everybody, I'm Ryan. Today we're going to talk about Yorion Fires in Pioneer, a deck that has recently risen back to popularity and actually the deck I'm grinding with right now. We're going to talk about the overall strategy of the deck, card choices in the deck, and hopefully how to play the deck. Let's jump into it. This is my Yorion Fires deck. Essentially what the deck is trying to do is play some enchantments in the early game, and then cast Fires of Invention so that you can cast 2 things a turn, normally pretty expensive things, while you're activating the abilities of your creatures like Kenrith, or putting your companion Yorion in your hand, or things like that, or activating Path of the World Tree or whatever. And then play Enigmatic Incarnation, where you can sacrifice enchantments to tutor out a bunch of one-of toolboxy creatures in our deck. And in essence, that's what this deck is. It's a toolbox deck. It's like a mid-range killer style deck, and it's kind of overwhelm you with just like higher quality cards kind of deck. So I'm gonna take just a second and I'm gonna rearrange the cards here to kind of be in the category that they exist in. So in this first category, we have dedicated removal spells. In fact, so dedicated, Change of the Rocks and Portable Hole can't be sacrificed to tutor out anything. Enigmatic Incarnation wants a creature that's 1 more than the mana value, and we have no 2 mana creatures in our deck. However, Leyline Binding is, the 1 mana O-Ring, very, very powerful in this deck. Sometimes you want to be hitting like a token with it so that you can cast Enigmatic Incarnation, sack Leyline Binding to get one of our big baddies like Atraxa or Agent of Treachery, which is very powerful. But this is our removal. This category are 4 playsets of cards that are dedicated cards that we're playing for the sake of being an enchantment we can sack to Enigmatic Incarnation. So Nihile's Presence, 2 mana enchant land. When you draw a card when you play it, and it's every basic land type, which is really relevant for things like Chain to the Rocks if you don't have a mountain, or makes Leyline Binding 1 mana no matter what. And in the mid and late game, once we have our colors and it isn't like as weird as the early game, we can sacrifice Nihile's Presence to Enigmatic Incarnation. Same thing with Path of the World Tree, grabbing a basic. We have 1 of every basic except for green in our deck, because if we're playing Path of the World Tree, then we already have access to green. This is a way to fix our mana. It's also something we can mana dump into once we have a Fires of Invention in the late game, something we can spend our mana on to kind of reload, because we can pay 7 mana, sacrifice it, gain 2 life, draw 2 cards, opponent loses 2 life, it deals 2 damage up to 1 target creature, and you create a 2/2 bear. So it's like a good refuel situation in the late game if they're answering your threats really efficiently. Up the Beanstalk, classically good card. 2 mana, enchantment, draw a card when it enters, and whenever you cast something that costs 5 or greater, you get to draw a card. We have Leyline Binding, we have these like all these 5 or more mana, 1 of payoffs in our deck as well. If you draw 2 cards off of Up the Beanstalk, or even just draw 1 card and then sack it to Enigmatic Incarnation, it's probably worth it. And then Fable the Mirror Breaker is a really cool card. It does everything this deck wants to do. It, creates a body, it ramps mana. You can filter out cards that don't do anything, because we are playing cards that don't do anything, tell you what. And then it flips into Reflection of Kiki-Jiki that can copy stuff. And there's a lot of things that if we copy, like especially our 1-of creatures, it becomes really, really powerful. We already talked about Enigmatic Incarnation and Fires of Invention. I guess the only thing I would say regarding them is one of the best turns you can have against mid-range decks is turn 4 Fires of Invention into Enigmatic Incarnation, because you can cast the Enigmatic Incarnation for free off of Fires of Invention. You can only cast no more than 2 spells each turn, but you can cast spells without paying their mana costs, as long as their mana cost is less than the number of lands you control. So you can go Fires, Enigmatic Incarnation, end step, sack an enchantment, tutor out something that's relevant, go, is an incredibly powerful turn 4. And Enigmatic Incarnation is a 4-mana enchantment. At the beginning of your end step, you can sacrifice another enchantment. If you do, search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to 1 plus the sacrifice enchantment's mana value, put that card in the battlefield, then shuffle. So what are these tutory cards in our deck? What are these cards that we're tutoring out? So let's grab them really quick. So these are our 3-mana targets. These are things that we can sacrifice Up the Beanstalk, Path of the World Tree, and Nihilia's Presence for. We're playing Kutziel's Flanker. It's really not a great card for any individual one of the modes, but having a bunch of options with Kutziel's Flanker is very powerful. In fact, you can choose one of these things, put a +1/+1 counter on Kutziel's Flanker for each creature that left the battlefield under your control this turn. This is very powerful, like in the mid to late game after you like Yorion or something, or if you naturally draw it, and there's a board wipe, and then it can enter the battlefield, and it's just huge. It's a really good value grab to just gain 2 life and scry 2 to be able to grab put cards that are relevant on top of your deck. And exiling a player's graveyard is very good against things like Greasefang and especially Phoenix. Deputy of Detention is a detention sphere on a creature. 3 mana, 1/3 when it enters the battlefield. Exile target non-land permanent opponent controls and all other permanents that player that controls with the same name as that permanent until Deputy of Detention leaves the battlefield. It's just solid removal. Knight of Autumn is another decent value grab. 3 mana, 2/1 when it enters the battlefield. Choose one. Put 2+1/+1 counters on Knight of Autumn, so you can just grab a 4/3 if you want to. Destroy target artifact or enchantment, which is obviously very powerful, and gain 4 life, which is really strong against these aggressive decks. Glasspool Mimic is also a land, however we can grab it to copy anything in our deck. This is pretty strong in a deck of one-ofs, where we might want another one of these enter the battlefield effects. And Skyclay's Apparition is just kind of another Deputy Detention, just serves a slightly different role. Exile up to 1 target non-land, non-token permanent you don't control mana value of 4 or less. And when it leaves the battlefield, the exiled card's owner creates an XX blue illusion creature token where X is the mana value of the exiled card. So kind of similar Deputy Detention. Only exiles 1, but cares a lot less what it is. Deputy Detention doesn't really care, but they literally get the thing back rather than get a spirit. You know, it's kind of interesting. So these are our 3 mana targets. We only have 1 4 mana target, so sometimes we want to sacrifice Fable and Mirror Breaker. It's hyper rare, though. Often, the times we do want to sacrifice Fable and Mirror Breaker, however, is against aggressive decks. So we're playing a 1-of target for sacrificing Fable. So 4 mana, 3/4 with flying and lifelink. Pegasus creatures you control have lifelink, and whenever an enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, create a 2/2 white Pegasus creature token with flying. So it gets out of hand really quickly because we play just so many enchantments, and it just being like a decent sized lifelinker is powerful as well. We have 3 options at 5 mana. Maybe. There we go. We have 3 options at 5 mana. One is Kenrith, which is kind of our value grab at 5 mana. It's really good alongside Fires of Invention because we have a bunch of mana that we're not spending on casting spells, so we can just be activating Kenrith. You can read those for yourselves. There's just a bunch of awesome value situations. One kind of relevant thing about Kenrith is you can pay 5 mana and put a creature card from a graveyard to the battlefield under its owner's control. Don't target your opponent's things in your opponent's graveyard, even as enticing as it is and as legal as it is, actually. We're playing an Elishnorn Mother of Machines, very good in the mirror match or against anything where it turns off opposing things enter the battlefield, any like Leyline Binding deck. But also a lot of our creatures do things when they enter the battlefield as well, and you know, drawing cards and when they enter the battlefield and whatever. It's just like really, really solid alongside our entire deck, and it neuters a lot of other decks. And Tolsimir is our 5 mana removal. 5 mana 3/3 when it enters the battlefield, create Voja. Friend to Elves, a legendary 3/3 green and white wolf creature token. When our wolf enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 3 life, and that creature fights up to 1 target creature you don't control. Obviously super powerful. And then we have 2 things we can grab if we sacrifice Leyline Binding. So I said Leyline Binding hitting like a token is very powerful because then they don't get anything back, and we can sacrifice Leyline Binding into one of these things. Agent of Treachery, which is a 7 mana 2/3 when it enters the battlefield, gain control of target permanent. And at the beginning of your end step, if you control 3 or more permanents you don't own, draw 3 cards. So really the first one is the thing that matters, but what's relevant is this is not a legendary creature, which means if you have a flipped Fable of Mirror Breaker, you can copy it and grab more things, and it doesn't go, and they don't gain it back when this thing dies. So even if you like blink it with Yorion or copy with Glasspool Mythic or Mimic or whatever, Agent of Treachery stays powerful and you keep their thing, which is just so good. And then Atraxa is our value grab. It's a 7 mana 7/7 flying vigilance death touch lifelink. When it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each card type, you may put a card of that type from among the revealed cards into your hand. Put the rest in the bottom of your library in a random order. Generally, when you grab Atraxa, you're drawing 4-ish cards, and you have a giant flying lifelink terrifying body. As far as our sideboard goes, rest in peace, we're playing for these graveyard decks like Phoenix and Greasefang and things like that. Eidolon of Rhetoric, very good against Phoenix because it means they can never trigger Phoenix. Also solid against like Lotus and things like that. Mystical Dispute is good against the blue decks because the blue decks are frankly really good against us, you know, if we're casting big haymakers all the time. Rending Volley, decent against Phoenix, insane against Greasefang, good against humans, you know, anything like that. Good against Spirits, which is actually a bad matchup for us. Rampaging Ferocidon, basically we're playing it for players not being able to gain life. Really solid against Amalia, but there are other situations we might want to side it in because we just have too many cards that are bad. Playing 2 Dovin's Veto just to compete with these counterspell decks a little bit more and be able to have like a little bit of on the stack interaction against the combo decks. We're playing Nimble Larcenist, and just as something we can side into tutor for, just like Eidolon. 3 mana 2/1. When it enters a battlefield, target opponent reveals their hand. You choose an artifact, instant, or sorcery card from it and exile that card. Just decent. Just having hand destruction we can tutor for is solid. And then the reason we're playing so many cards, sorry, kitty, Yorion. Yorion being a 5 mana 4/5 companion. Our starting deck has to contain 20 more cards than the minimum deck size, which it does. We have 80. Flying, and when it enters battlefield, exile any number of target of other non-land permanents you control or you own and control. Return those cards to the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. Most things in our deck have entered the battlefield effects, so casting Yorion nearly always means that we're getting a bunch of triggered things, and it's just really good. And that is Yorion Fires in Pioneer. If you like these deck tech videos, please be sure to like and subscribe. Check me out on social medias. Links are above me and in the description. Thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.